See, I
We are so excited, family, to be here at the shrine of Blessed Kateri EWTN in Fonda, New York, right outside of Albany. It's only about 10 miles from the shrine of the North American Martyrs in Auriesville. We're here with Father Jim, custodian of the shrine here.
Oh, what a blessing. What a blessing to walk on this holy ground. I have had such a sense since we started to tape the lives of the saints, of the martyrs of North America. At first, I was deep into the pain, the suffering, the price that was paid. Being a mother and a grandmother, all I could see was the pain these young men endured.
All we have seen is the violence and the atrocities, but we never did see the fruits of that. Then we come just a short distance, and we meet the lily of the Mohawks, the fruit of the evangelization of the Jesuits here in the United States and in Canada, Blessed Kateri EWTN. So we see that although the Jesuits left here in 1649 completely depressed, thinking that it had been a failure, the fruits even then were beginning to blossom.
And she, so like our early martyrs, right, Father? She was in love with Jesus. She was solely given, it would seem, Father's going to tell us about it, but it would seem that she was giving her life totally to our Lord and wanted no one else. And so she rather give up her life than enter into a relationship, even marriage.
The life of Kateri, I find personally fascinating because, like St. Francis, when she chose to follow Christ, in a very short time, became totally conformed in many ways to his life, the life of Christ. Growing up among the Mohawk people, among the Iroquois Confederacy, which is 5 Indian nations that banded together throughout New York State, the Mohawks were known as being the most violent in many ways.
There was always struggle between the tribes, with sometimes neighboring tribes attacking the Iroquois to gain territory, and at other times, the Iroquois initiating the attack. They were merciless against their captives. When their neighbors were brought back to camp, it was the women who made the decisions whether they would live as slaves or die, very often inflicting the most hideous torture upon their captives until they did die. Even the little girls inflicted the most heartless torment upon the prisoner day on end. Into this, Kateri was born in 1656 at Osinanon. Her father was a Mohawk chief, part of the Iroquois. Her mother, an Algonquin woman, was a Catholic.
In fact, she learned Christianity initially from her own mother, an Algonquin Indian, who, in marrying her father, who was a tribal chief, she, as she grew up, learned about the Christian faith, and eventually, as we know from the work of the missionary, wished to learn more about her faith. But as time went on, the tribe, when they were first banded together and she was first born in this area of the Mohawk Valley, they were over at a smaller village across the way called Osinanon, now close to Auriesville. the Jesuit shrine of the North American martyrs. In her youth, one of the reasons the whole tribe moved here was because smallpox hit the tribe and killed off more than half of their people, not just Kateri's parents and her younger brother. So that illness left her with a potted face, and it affected her eyesight, so she could not stay out in bright sunlight. She had to often cover her eyes because the sun bothered her ability to see. Because of that, she obviously used her time well. In the longhouse, she worked on beadwork, and she tried to help around the chores of the family, her longhouse family. And it's during that time, it seems that she developed a more profound interior life. And when she embraced Christ, as we know with many of the Mohawk Indians, when they make up their mind, they are committed to a cause. And Kateri rightfully did that.
Father, the thought that kept going through my mind as you were talking, do you have an idea, is there some idea about how old she might have been when her parents died?
My understanding is somewhere around the age of 8 to 10 when she lost her parents.
All right, now think about how remarkable that was. This was the thought. And we don't realize the influence that we have on our children. The first 8 years of her life, her mother brought her the gospel, brought her the Catholic faith. And even though she went amongst her people and she served them, I'm sure she loved them, I'm sure they had a wonderful relationship, there was that longing for that which had been planted in her heart by her mother, and that was Jesus. So although her relatives had a belief in a greater spirit, and that may be another name that they gave to God, she wanted more.
The call of God in Kateri's heart became so strong, and her striving for virtue, despite her family's disagreement with her. In fact, her aunts seemed to have given her quite a hard time while living here on this property. It was during that time that she greatly interiorized life and apparently completely turned it over to Christ, and which makes it a very striking story, given the fact her culture at that time gave no support to it. And in Kateri's case, she would pull back a bit. Her illness gave her the opportunity for space and time, but she was very generous in offering her efforts when they were gathering crops from the field or when they were preparing the meats for storage for wintertime and smoking. She cooperated as much as she could, and yet, as family members can sometimes do, they have hopes for their children, desires for their future, and they try to affect things around them so as to have them live out the life they're hoping for. And it seems to be more of a conflict in that area. That Kateri was not as willing to just simply go along with their desires. It was rather she was discerning this inner call of God and choosing to give her life totally to Christ. And in that inner choice, not that she was always conscious of it, but as she did become aware of it, she made it a point to devote her time, attention, whole prayer life, her whole life, in fact, to God.
I noticed up on the beam here that it says Kateri refuses forced marriage. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We know that in 1676, one of her aunts had made an arrangement secretly behind her back to have another warrior come and marry her. And he came, and one of the ceremonial offerings to indicate her interest in him was for her to cook a meal and then offer it to him. And by his accepting it and then giving her a gift in return, there would have been a proposal of marriage. And in the course of the meal, she suddenly put two and two together. And what we try to depict in one of these murals is her not being aware of this marriage proposal taking place during this ceremonial dinner. Suddenly becoming aware of it, she simply stood up and left the room.
When the Jesuits came into her midst, Kateri gravitated toward them and their teaching.
She was isolated from the other natives, but she was complete with her Lord, who she was mystically embracing. She began to take on the cross. When Father Lambertville came into the village, Kateri told him of her desire to become a Catholic. Hoping this would bring her out of her solitude, she received permission from her uncle to receive instructions in the faith. But he cautioned her to be careful. He was afraid of the reaction from the rest of the tribe because of her position as his adopted daughter. The day of her baptism finally arrived. All of the Mohawk village turned out to see the chief's adopted daughter accepting the religion of the black robes on Easter Sunday. This could be a giant step for the black robes. Father named Kateri after Catherine of Siena, the great mystic. Little did he know how prophetic that would be. Kateri was 20 years old.
After her baptism, she became more and more contemplative and consequently more removed from the other young people. She suffered deeply when she saw them practicing pagan rituals. As she drew closer to Jesus, the brutality as well as the pursuit of the flesh, which was so ingrained in the culture of her people, became unbearable. This further alienated her from the young people. They responded with anger and cruelty, completely intolerant of her lifestyle, and now to the point of possibly posing a danger to her. One of the things that infuriated the older as well as the younger members of the tribe was her always fingering and saying the rosary. Even her relatives told her to put it away. As she got closer to Jesus, she grew closer to his mother.
She was no longer called Tekawitha, but mockingly the Christian. A young warrior attacked her, threatening to kill her if she did not stop her Christian ways. Father Lambertville started to see the dangers posed for Kateri.
Rumor had been among all the different tribes that they would not be accepted among the Onondagas, the Senecas, many of them. So they gathered and set down a village life outside of the city of Montreal. They were known in those days as the group of the Praying Indians. They were all Christians and very warm and welcoming. One of the tribal chiefs who became a Christian and joined that group was so moved by the experience of being there, and he had heard rumor of Kateri's experience here at our shrine, that he came down in secret with two braves in order to help her to get away so that she would have the freedom to express openly her love for Christ and to live it around those who would support her completely. And hence, one night...
So she left, just her and the two, the Indian and the brave left for Canada.
The uncle was furious. Fearing Kateri had been kidnapped, he loaded his gun and took out after the braves who had assisted Kateri's escape. When he approached, he found the brave casually smoking. He never saw Kateri, who was safely hidden in a tree trunk.
Kateri's move to the praying village did not deliver her from the persistent nagging of well-meaning family insisting she marry. She went to Father Cholanek, who assured her she was free to choose a life of aversion and that the mission would defend her right. Kateri had learned about the saints from the Black Robes. She wanted to be close to Jesus as his spouse, as the saints had before her. Kateri went to Father and told him that she desired to be the Lord's bride on earth for the short time she had left. Father granted her wish.
On March the 25th, 1679, Kateri Tekakwitha became the first Native American to consecrate herself, her virginity, her purity, her very soul to Jesus. Kateri began to show the signs of the great mystics before her. She could be spotted by her family and other members of the tribe praying, motionless, lost to everything and everyone around her. The natives noticed the change that came about her. She was, like the holy saints before, among them physically, but it was obvious she was not spiritually there, but somewhere beyond.
Kateri knew death was near. She was ready to go home to her spouse, to live with him as his servant eternally. The Indians began visiting her, asking for guidance and counsel. Her body, weakened by the great mortification she had inflicted upon herself, was racked with pain. The priests brought her the viaticum, or as we say today, they bestowed on her the sacrament of the healing of the sick. Kateri asked to be dressed in the finest clothes, as at last she would receive her spouse in Holy Communion. She had longed for this moment, as Saint Therese the Little Flower said, for that first kiss from Jesus. After she received her first Holy Communion, the members of the mission filed in, taking turns, keeping vigil with her, their dying sister, who they never quite understood, but got to love.
When they laid Kateri's still body on the pallet, no longer was there a face pockmarked by smallpox, a body twisted and darkened by pain. Instead, her skin lightened. It became clear, without scars. She was not only serene, she was beautiful. Two Frenchmen who had known Kateri came and inquired who was the beautiful maiden who was asleep on the pallet. When Father Cholanek informed them that it was Kateri, they knelt beside her and wept. As word spread through the colonies via the two Frenchmen, everyone exclaimed as one, "The saint is dead." Miracles began at once. The sick were healed, the lame walked.
Father Choquetier was the first she appeared to 6 days after she was buried. Kateri was radiant. In one hand, she had a church upside down, and in the other, a Native American tied to a burning stake. The priest did not understand what she was saying until 3 years later, when a tornado hit the church and turned it upside down. The second prophecy was to come to pass when the Onondagas attacked the mission during a war between the tribes. An Iroquois Christian was captured and burned at the stake. The second one Kateri appeared to was her adopted mother, Anastasia. She said that she saw a beautiful Kateri beside her holding a shining cross. She told Anastasia that she had loved the cross while on earth and loved it even more in heaven.
One of the things that we do know is if Blessed Kateri is made a saint, she would be the first native-born Native American Indian to become a saint in the church. And that's what we're hoping and praying for, not only here, but at her shrine that's up in Canada, Kanawaki Reservation, where Father James Jacques Brier is also promoting her cause for the Jesuits.
Hello, family, and welcome. We are so excited. We are at Kanawaki, Canada, near Montreal, which is the resting place, the final resting place of Blessed Kateri Tekakwitha. And with us here is Father Jacques Brier, who is the vice postulator for the cause of Canonization of Kateri Tekakwitha. In back of us, we have some relics from the time of Kateri, as well as artifacts that were given to the mission by the people of France.
So what we see now is a monstrance, and this came from Paris, and it was given to the mission in 1668. That is when Kateri was still living. And most probably, Kateri did kneel before this monstrance to adore the Blessed Sacrament.
Father, is it not true that they had in the little mission where Kateri, you say, settled, that they had Mass twice a day, once in the morning for the Jesuits, which once she found out she was allowed to attend, she attended, and many of the other North Americans, Indians, would come also, wouldn't they? So, and then she would stay on. And that you had to rise at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they would say their office, the divine office, and then Mass, and then she would remain until the 8 o'clock Mass.
And when they were visiting missionaries, she would also attend their Masses too. But you know, she also was a real Indian girl. She did work with the fishermen and the hunters, so some days she couldn't attend Mass, and this was very disturbing for her. So she refused, on Sundays she refused to go to do all these chores, you know, that the normal Indian girl would do.
I see. So she never neglected her duties, but God came first.
That's okay.
Something that I read, and correct me if I'm incorrect, when she suffered, and of course her fellow Indians could not understand her desire for chastity and for celibacy. Yes. And so she did suffer because they didn't understand, and so they would criticize her and alienate her. She would come before the Blessed Sacrament for her consolation.
This is true. And you know, for an Indian girl, it was normal that she would marry.
Exactly.
So her uncle who took care of her after her own father passed away wanted her very badly to get married, and she refused all the time. And more so after she went to Montreal and met some sisters over there who had this vow of chastity, and she came back here to her spiritual father, Father Scholneck and Father Schocher, and scolded them. You didn't tell me about that I could be a nun also, and I could make a special vow of chastity all my life and live with all these religious. So this is why from that time on, Kateri wished herself to found a congregation of Indian girls, made up of Indian girls, who would practice celibacy, chastity, and all the virtues. And she was going to erect a building even on an island close to the place where she actually died. And she wanted to build like a convent, eh?
Yes.
But the missionaries said, well, you'll be in danger there. Your own people will come to get you from the Mohawk Valley, or maybe some French soldiers will bother you over there. So they dissuaded her because she was also too young in faith.
Yes.
She'd only been baptized for 2 years,
Yes.
but she was already a saint at that time.
Yes.
You know, in talking about her as a mystic, Kateri, when she went to church, knelt down and stayed kneeling, and her friends and people would like to come too close to her because she was just like in ecstasy.
Praise God.
Like in ecstasy. She was all raptured and taken up by this holy the presence of the Lord. And this is what we can see she was a real mystic. Yes.
Was this when she was kneeling before the monstrance? Before
Yeah,
the Blessed
at
Sacrament?
that time. Yes,
At
that time, yeah. So all her fans would like to kneel beside her and just looking at her, and she didn't mind because she didn't even know they were there, maybe staring at her like that.
Is it true, I believe I read, that they called her the saint, even in her lifetime?
Well, they called her the saint. And you know, the last town where she lived, the mission where she lived, was called the town of prayer, the village of prayer. And we can say that not only Kateri was a saint, but many other people living there with her who were new Christians were living as saints, you know.
Well, so what was
even
it?
men
A
and women and
mission,
girls.
Was it a mission just for catechumens and those who had entered the faith? Did they all congregate
La
together?
Prairie was mixed, French people and natives.
Yes.
But the other missions, when they moved this way, it was only for Indians, catechumens and already baptized Indians.
And whereas they might be together many tribes who were enemies at times, who were hostile to each other, they lived in perfect harmony because of their belief in Christ. Did you read that too, Father?
This is true, and according to the history of those times, Father Bishar wrote about that in a special way. He said that in Kanawaki at the beginning here, there were catechumens from 24 different tribes.
And they lived together.
Lived together, in harmony, as you say.
Did she ever become a nun? Did she ever found an order of nuns?
I have to say that she never accomplished that, though it has been said, I guess, in some big American magazine that she was a nun. She never became a nun, but in a way she lived as a nun, but I would say she lived like an Indian girl, like the other girls, except that she had a special love for her Lord.
There is one thing that we find so exciting about this shrine, especially, and this part of Kateri's life. You see, when the Jesuits left Huronia and they burned down St. Marie of the Hurons, as far as they were concerned, they were a failure. They had failed in this mission. And yet, little by little, the seeds planted by the blood of the martyrs was starting to grow. And in Kateri's life, she came to this place which became a haven, a refuge for Indians who had converted to Christianity, where they would be safe from the people that had not yet taken on the Christian mentality. So this was the fruits, this was the real fruits of the martyrs. All the work and the torture and the dying that took place was paid for here. Here, the fruits of the martyrs came to life. It is just such an exciting part of the story of the martyrs, which began in Huronia and really ended right here. Well, we want to thank you, Father, for you gave us a lot more than we thought. You really have been terrific in helping us learn about Kateri, about this shrine. And we're looking forward to having our people see the video here and come and visit here near Albany in New York State, one of the most powerful shrines of a Native American, one of us who is beatified near the shrine of the North American martyrs, those Jesuits who gave their lives for the evangelization of this country and for the civilization of this country. And so we really recommend that you come on down, come on up, wherever it is for you. Come and visit these shrines here in the United States. They are just absolutely beautiful.
Amen.
Well, family, we have so much to learn, don't we? We can spend the rest of our life. A priest said, answered a woman who said, my child is 3 years old. Is it too early to start teaching her about the faith? He said, you're 3 years too late. And so we have a lifetime of learning. And this is a place where you have to be here. You feel her, and you feel all those who went before us. It's so wonderful to be with Father Jim today.
Thank you.
Because he does represent our priesthood, the selfless men who every day say yes to God and bring us Jesus, because we are very much like our Native American brothers and sisters of the 17th century. We need to hear anew and to see anew through their example that Jesus Christ is alive and he loves us.
We love you.
We love you.
God bless you.
God bless you.